When Karen vandalized my car in a fit of HOA fury, I was thrust into a battle that blurred the lines between justice and chaos. Would I emerge as the hero or the villain? The morning sun streamed through my window, bright and cheery, which is entirely betraying how I truly felt, like a caged lion ready to pounce on the first unwelcome intruder. I lay in my bed, brewing for my imminent war with the Homeowners Association, my arch nemeses clad in pastel blouses and tailored slacks. And just as I sipped my coffee, as if sent from the heavens to fortify my resolve, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of Karen's judgmental droning wafting across the street. The audacity! There she was, waggling her finger in the air like she was conducting some symphony of saccharine suburban drama. My blood simmered, and I felt my hazel eyes narrow into slits of righteous indignation. Who did this woman think she was? The Empress of Porch Banter? With my caffeine-fueled surge of courage, I decided that enough was enough. Sure, I could comply with the HOA's ridiculous fence rules because apparently a perfect white picket fence was the only acceptable barrier separating one's garden from the green grass of entitlement next door. But challenging them? Oh, darling, that was an entirely different kettle of absurdities. Armed with bravado and a smart casual blazer that screamed, "I'm a rebel with a cause," I stepped outside to face the prying eyes of my oppressors. Instantly, I felt like David confronting Goliath, not with a slingshot, but with my invigorating brew of coffee in hand and a particularly punchy protest sign I had hastily fashioned from leftover cardboard. "Leah Thompson, fence warrior at your service," I chirped, waving my sign like it was a trophy for the best obscure hobbyist. I could almost see Karen's meticulously coiffed hair bristle like a porcupine in response to my defiance. It was a glorious moment, one that amplified my caffeine high to the point of sheer euphoria. But then, just as my spirits soared, I noticed the cul-de-sac's tone turned distinctly sinister. Like a dark cloud creeping across my sunny morning, I sensed the HOA's looming shadow, a pack of entitled guardians ready to stain my rebellion with their snobbish remarks and prying eyes. The battle was officially afoot. A suspicious-looking white van parked itself across the street, completely unmarked but eerily reminiscent of a sting operation straight out of a low-budget crime drama. My amusement turned to incredulity as I caught sight of Karen peering through her blinds like a cat watching a particularly uncoordinated mouse. Did they think they could intimidate me? I instructed my inner voice not to faint from laughter at their pathetic attempts at dominance. "Surveillance? Really?" I muttered, half snorting, half cackling. "Could someone pass me my popcorn? This is going to be the most boring episode of Keeping Up with the HOA yet." Meanwhile, my faithful neighbor Mark ambled over to join the fray, sporting a t-shirt that said, "I love being the underdog." I rolled my eyes playfully but welcomed his witty commentary. "Nice lawn maintenance, Karen," he hollered with a grin, nodding toward the faux manicured grass, so pristine it felt like it was hiding some secret conspiracy. "Looks like you need to open a shrubbery-themed support group." His humor sliced through the tense air around us, injecting me with even more determination to stand firm against HOA tyranny. Nothing quite fueled my spirit like the idea of scandalously overthrowing a group of snooty lawn Nazis. It took precisely 10 minutes for Karen's tranquil demeanor to shatter like glass beneath the weight of my amusement. Fueled by righteous indignation and Mark's snarky commentary, I baked up a storm of escalated actions. Suddenly, I was not just a discontent homeowner, I was an avant-garde renegade daring to challenge the absurdity of HOA laws. I thought back to my day job, the thrill of pursuing white-collar criminals, and how no one ever imagined that behind this blazer-wearing shenanigans connoisseur, there lay a woman with a passion for justice that could rival any superhero's backstory. But little did I know, this was only the beginning. What I considered a whimsical showdown of neighborhood hockey was about to spiral into a full-blown contest of who had the bigger balls, me or Karen. As I plotted my next moves against her never-ending entitlement, I felt the gears of fate shifting relentlessly. There was something oddly poetic about the idea of serving subpoenas and meting out justice in the middle of lawn wars. Bring it on, Karen. You truly have no idea who you're messing with. What would transpire next in this battle of absurd proportions could only leave one feeling simultaneously exasperated yet oddly entertained. And oh, how I planned to revel in every moment. The moment I spotted my car glinting under the unforgiving sun, a wave of conflicting emotions washed over me. There it stood in all its glory, or rather in all its sabotaged disgrace, tires flat as my hopes of a peaceful existence in this suburban paradise, and an audacious splattering of paint that looked determined to mock my taste. Ah, yes, there it was, precisely what every homeowner dreams of. a channeling of modern art right in my driveway by none other than Karen Miller, the dramatic diva of the HOA. It was as if she was squatting on her throne of pastel blouses, cackling gleefully as if she'd just orchestrated Beethoven's Ninth in soundbite form. I felt my blood boil. Karen, the queen of entitlement, had taken her judgmental crusade to the next level. Who knew the Homeowners Association was operating a vandalism enterprise on the side? Seriously, the irony of a self-proclaimed guardian of suburbia resorting to such childish tricks should be a tale worthy of a modern Shakespearean comedy. I prepared to transform my outrage into a symphony of justice. As I surveyed the paint job that could only be described as post-apocalyptic clown, I couldn't help but laugh at what absurd lengths she'd gone to. A faint part of me thought maybe she just wanted a spotlight on her impeccable yard. Couldn't dream of letting my car steal her attention, could she? Fueled by a heady mix of righteous indignation and a hint of disbelief at the low blows in this HOA turf war, I picked up my phone, fingers flying across the screen like a concert pianist showcasing virtuosic prowess. "Hey, Mark, you might want to come over. Karen has done something truly spectacular to my car. If you're free and have a camera, it'd be a prime time for mocking pretty much all things HOA. I texted him, barely containing the maniacal laughter bubbling in my chest. The thought of turning this entire debacle into a spectacle of public ridicule was exhilarating. It was time to turn the tide, and perhaps this farcical stunt could garner some neighborhood attention. Mark arrived shortly after, carrying a six-pack of craft beer as if he was bearing the elixir of life itself. "What's wrong? Did you offend her precious hydrangeas?" he quipped, his face alight with mischief the second he spotted my car bearing the vivid evidence of Karen's unhinged creativity. "I mean, wow! I didn't realize we were in the midst of a neighborhood renaissance. It's almost avant-garde." He snapped pictures while I gestured dramatically toward my car like a downtrodden diva presenting her tragic fate to an audience. I could feel the ridiculousness of the situation merging beautifully with our laughter, and suddenly my outrage morphed into something far more exhilarating. The sweet thrill of plotting my very own chaos initiative against Karen. "How do we turn this chaos into a chance for some righteous payback?" I asked, a sinister grin spreading across my face. Mark, always the witty conspirator, leaned in. "Let's go to war, Leah. Transformation isn't just about filling potholes in the illusion of utopia. It's about dismantling the very foundation of absurdity." With that battle cry, we concocted a plan that would astound even the most hardened of renegades. Using social media to rally the neighborhood around the cause of artistic validity, we would broadcast the paint job catastrophe with hashtags like Karengate and Suburban Screwjob. Oh, how sweet it would be to have her hoisted at her own pastel petard. In the days that followed, I transformed into an avenging angel for all those who dared to question the oppressive grip of HOA tyranny. I posted the photographs, hashtags, and intense commentary, poised like a general mapping tactical moves to gather a small band of fellow rebel homeowners. If this was what Karen wanted, a battle without rules or honor, then a battle she would get. My car had become a symbol, and I would not allow it to stand alone in the paint-splattered anguish. I could already imagine the fervor building, my neighbors emerging from their front doors, united in disbelief and howling laughter at Karen's questionable taste in artistic expression. But as the buzz around the neighborhood picked up speed like a runaway train barreling toward a cliff, something nagged at the back of my mind. Was I actually inviting more chaos into my life, or was this destiny knocking at my door with a paintbrush in one hand and a box of legal papers in the other? My heart raced at the thought. After all, the line between justice and anarchy often looked ridiculously similar. If my career in prosecuting white-collar crime taught me anything, it was that truth could be as messy as a can of paint hurled at a suburban dream, especially when dealing with the likes of Karen Miller. Yet I couldn't wait to see how she responded to my stunt. Would she retaliate with another dastardly act of vandalism, or dig out the big guns of HOA law? Bring it on! I was ready for whatever her entitlement was about to unleash. With my scheme taking flight, I felt both a rush of anticipation and a hint of chaos looming on the horizon, ready to plunge me deeper into this delightful suburban melodrama. With the virtual chaos launched in full swing, the neighborhood's response was nothing short of astounding. As I pored over the flood of likes, shares, and comments on my post, it was clear that Karen's paint job had sparked outrage, and dare I say, a movement. Who knew that a splash of paint and a few well-placed hashtags could turn my mundane suburban struggles into a viral sensation? It was as if the entire world was watching. I could picture Karen clutching her pearls while staring in horror at her computer screen, her pastel blouses glowing in the dim light of her oversized living room, bringing to life my favorite new meme. When HOA tyranny meets artistic freedom, Mark became my #1 hype man, standing by my side like a trusty sidekick in a buddy cop movie. "Leah, this is taking off like a rocket," he said, scrolling through his phone while sipping one of the craft beers he'd uncapped earlier. "You're about to be the Rosa Parks of HOA opposition." I chuckled at the comparison, half expecting to see Karen chain herself to the nearest hydrangea or lead a protest demanding, "No paint left behind." What kind of ludicrously dystopian future was I thrust into? One moment I was merely trying to advocate for the right to park without fear of artistic intervention, and the next I was spearheading the rebellion against suburban tyranny. As my notoriety grew, I began to form clandestine meetings with my new followers, dubbed the Suburban Underground Alliance. We would gather in the backyards of brave souls willing to break away from the tight grip of Karen's reign, sharing laughter, grievances, and ideas. Each time we assembled, the energy surged. We concocted even more elaborate plans to challenge Karen's authority while fostering a sense of camaraderie among the residents who had once trembled at her judgmental glare. I couldn't help but joke that her pastels were becoming a rallying cry, a banner of rebellion waving proudly across our little suburban battlefield. "Next up," I declared, half serious, "we should introduce a new rule. All garden gnomes must wear tie-dye." But just as our silly revolt was gathering momentum, Karen retaliated. The email blast she sent out was the stuff of HOA legends, peppered with dramatic threats and cliches like disorderly conduct and community standards. In her machinations, she likened me to a vandal and urged my fellow homeowners to take back their neighborhood. I could practically hear the sound of her high-pitched screech echoing through the tree-lined streets. Meanwhile, my fellow warriors clutched their smartphones, enraptured by the unfolding drama. Oh, how deliciously absurd this all was. I was merely a prosecutor fighting white-collar crime, and Karen had turned me into a living, breathing soap opera. Amidst the delicious chaos, I hatched a plan to leverage Karen's own entitlement against her. Armed with lists and a bold tone, I drafted a counter letter to the HOA board, firmly asserting our right to expression, creativity, and dissent in the face of Karen's hilariously misguided reign. "Dear HOA board," I began, channeling every ounce of sarcastic fervor I could muster, "we the people would like to remind Karen that part of living in a vibrant community includes our ability to express ourselves, especially when someone willingly chooses to decorate our vehicles in abstract artistry." I hit send with a triumphant grin, envisioning the strain on her meticulously manicured brow as she read what was essentially a declaration of artistic freedom. The culmination of this saga arrived at the next HOA meeting, where tensions were palpably thick, and the smell of fresh pastries barely masked the underlying dread circulating through the room. Residents filled every crevice, lively chit-chatter giving way to hushed whispers of curiosity. The board feared the wrath of one angry artist while Karen fumed with fury at her dwindling power. I sat there across from her, steadfast like a knight ready for battle. The moment to present my case drew near, and I could hardly contain my excitement. Gavel in hand, the incredulous board called things to order, unaware of the whirlwind that Karen and I were about to unleash. As the meeting commenced, I knew that the moment of reckoning was finally upon us. The stage was set. It was time for a showdown. Would it end in artistic liberation or strict HOA authoritarianism? The tension in the air crackled like an electric storm, and I was ready to become the storm's very eye. Karen may have thought she could sabotage my car with impunity, but little did she know, I was the crusader of culinary justice in an absurd suburban farce, standing tall and adorned with sarcasm like a badge. And so, as the gavel came down, I took a deep breath and prepared to launch into my art house defense, the chorus of justice behind me, and Karen's pastel blouses looming ahead. The moment the gavel struck, silence fell over the room like a lead balloon. I could almost hear the rustling of the HOA bylaws flicking nervously in Karen's purse, desperate to validate her supposed superiority. All eyes were on me, a lone rebel in smart casual attire, about to unleash an avalanche of suburbia-shattering truths. I straightened my blazer, a small gesture meant to cultivate the image of a warrior in the battlefield of decorum. "Thank you, esteemed board members and my fellow homeowners," I began, injecting a light, sarcastic lilt into my voice. "Today, we gather not just as residents of Maple Lane, but as champions of creative expression in our dystopian dreamland." Cheers erupted from the back of the room, a potent mix of applause and laughter that reverberated through the pristine walls adorned with Karen's poorly painted floral arrangements. Even Mark, my crafty sidekick, was there with a knowing grin, giving me an exaggerated thumbs up as if we were two actors in an indie film making history. I took a moment to soak it all in, relishing the dramatic shift in energy. There I stood, the hero of this suburban saga, wielding nothing but a few well-timed words and an incredulous audience, ready to take their dumpy, beige lives back from the clutches of the pastel tyrant. Now, let's address the elephant, or rather, the oversized pastel blouse, in the room, shall we? I continued, as chuckles filled the air. Every pair of eyes flickered toward Karen, who was practically vibrating like an electric fence gone rogue. Karen Miller's crusade against artistic expression holds no weight in a community that champions creativity. If we're going to focus on standards, what about the standard of creativity? My words lashed out like a wind-up toy on a rampage, caught up in the delicious irony of how absurd life had suddenly become. I veered into the macabre humor of my car sabotage recount, detailing how my cherished ride had been subjugated to the whims of Karen's petty jealousy. Yes, Karen, you may have decked my car out in a paint job that could only be described as a taxidermy project gone wrong, I proclaimed, relishing the outraged gasps from the audience. But let's not forget, art speaks louder than HOA bylaws. With every syllable, I could see Karen's composure breaking down. Her pastel blouses went stiff instead of billowy, and I wondered momentarily if she might actually spontaneously combust from indignation. Fueled by adrenaline and the sweetness of rebellion, I steered my speech toward a more philosophical tone, emphasizing the right to self-expression in our cookie-cutter neighborhood. Do we, as residents of Maple Lane, really want to raise our children in a world where fear of Karen's judging glare stifles their creativity? Imagine a world where garden gnomes dance in tie-dye and every mailbox tells a different story. Wouldn't that be a lot more fun? The cheers and applause grew louder until I envisioned the HOA board members covered in confetti, the official welcoming committee for a new era. My words had transformed from simple assertions of justice into a rallying cry for creativity in our regimented lives. But before I could bask in the warmth of my momentum, Karen sprang into action, employing the deeply theatrical techniques that only an HOA queen could muster. "Leah, this is not acceptable behavior," she screeched, her voice reverberating like a car alarm. "Your actions are disturbingly disorderly and utterly juvenile." At that moment, I thought of how tragic it was to be bested in creativity by someone whose idea of an artistic gala was only a floral-patterned blouse. I could already hear my colleague's laughter ringing in my ears, imagining him saying, "Oh, Karen, a real modern Picasso, except with actual paint chips on her conscience." As the meeting devolved into a back-and-forth absolute war of words, I realized this was the golden hour, a splendid sunrise in the midst of suburban mediocrity. I leaned into the chaos, tossing out generous doses of sarcasm, each quip sharper than the last. The exchange could have easily been mistaken for a dramatic play, a classic duel between the villainess with her bitter disdain for creativity and the brave crusader armed with nothing but creative zeal and a desire for justice. If being disorderly means painting my car more than pastel, Karen, then I wear that title with pride. Let's all embrace our inner renegades, shall we? As the room pulsed with a collective energy, I noticed a new light igniting in the residents' expressions. They were no longer an audience, but an army of misfits emboldened by the laughter and shared frustrations. It was time to elevate our suburban rebellion to new heights. I felt my heart race with inspiration as the possibilities churned in my mind like frothy craft beer on a hot summer day. Victory was sweet, almost enough to make me forget the glances Karen shot my way like an archer, aiming to pierce the heart of creativity itself. Yet, ironically enough, the battle wasn't over just yet. With one last flourish, I opened my mouth to declare the next phase of our glorious revolution, ready to keep the momentum alive and vibrant. With the room buzzing like a shaken soda can, I could practically hear the gears whirring in the heads of my fellow residents, their minds racing toward a rebellion that had been suppressed for far too long. Karen, on the other hand, was now at the center of an emotional hurricane, her tightly coiffed hair shifting dangerously close to disarray. What a thrilling metaphorical wind for her inflated ego. Am I losing control? I imagined her wondering, eyes darting as she flared her nostrils like a bull ready to charge. But the truth was, for all her huffing and puffing, the winds of change were already sweeping through Maple Lane like an unexpected tropical storm. "Order! Order!" Karen bellowed, attempting to regain lost ground. But the enthusiasm in that room was like a hot air balloon on a liftoff, soaring higher with every outburst of laughter at her expense. "You're all letting this nonsense get out of hand," she protested, her finger jabbing in my direction with all the ferocity of a sharpened pencil. But rather than tremble in fear, the gathering exploded into spontaneous applause, their support echoing wildly like a rock concert. I smiled, feeling like the classic underdog facing off against a cartoon villain. I couldn't help but relish the delirious joy of knowing I had helped awaken a sleeping giant, an HOA that had never, ever dared to question its overlord. As I gazed across the sea of suddenly emboldened neighbors, I locked eyes with Mark, who was grinning like the Cheshire Cat. In that moment, something in me snapped, and instead of shutting up, I doubled down. You know, Karen, maybe we should actually consider a fitness program for our neighborhood. Get the homeowners out to work out that tennis elbow from all that time spent waving those overly judgmental fingers around, I quipped, and the room erupted into laughter. Karen looked positively nuclear, her face practically sizzling as she frothed at the mouth while trying to muster some semblance of authority. The way I see it, I continued, fueled by every giggle and guffaw, someone needs to remind Miss Miller that creativity doesn't just happen in the pages of a faded art book. It happens here, in our homes, our driveways, and yes, even on our cars. And if she thinks she can paint her narrative of control over us, she's about to be hit with a vivid counter-color palette we didn't even know we had in us. A collective gasp filled the air as residents glanced from my galvanizing figure to Karen, whose meticulously manicured eyebrows shot toward her hairline in disbelief. As I dissected her character, a veritable clown hiding behind tailored slacks, Karen fired back with a transparency that could only be described as uninspired. "Leah," she blurted, "this isn't the stage for your personal agenda." Ah, there it was. The moment when the villain in the story exposed all the flimsy strings holding her reality together. "But Karen," I retorted, "what's a community meeting if you can't unleash your dramatic flair?" The chuckles only grew louder, and I knew in that sacred moment I was not only challenging Karen's reign of pastel oppression but dismantling the very narrative that had stifled our community for years, and it felt oh so satisfying. My eyes traveled the room again, taking in the sight of tomorrow's artists, kaleidoscopic garden gnomes shaping the future of Maple Lane. In this boiling cauldron of dissent, we were not just homeowners anymore, but pioneers poised to take back our identity. I gestured to the residents. Imagine a neighborhood where the loudest voice isn't an HOA member wielding bylaws like a sword, but the laughter and joy radiating from a mural-toting van, or the eclipse of mundane with each gleefully painted front door. I could hear the gasps and muffled giggles, a chorus my heart had been yearning to hear, and I leaned further into the audience's eagerness. Just then, as if she had finally run out of both steam and pastels, Karen resorted to the most passionate tactic in her arsenal, a palpable drama that rivaled any Shakespearean tragedy. As a member of this community, I strongly suggest we enforce some decorum in the name of neighborhood unity, she spat, but it suddenly felt like a deflated balloon narrowly escaping the grasp of children. Everyone could sense it, her control was waning. The energy in that room had shifted, and we could poke the hornet's nest all we wanted and live to tell the tale. As Mark leaned back in his chair, an expression of delight painted on his face, I knew the winds at our backs were just the beginning. It wasn't merely about challenging Karen anymore. It was about creating a new identity for Maple Lane, one that fiercely embraced chaos in the face of pastel tyranny. With determination wound tighter than a coiled spring, I prepared to expand on our collective vision. I propose we reinstate creativity as our community's middle name. Let's paint this town, literally, every color of the rainbow. Who's with me? The applause surged like a tidal wave, and the absurdity of our mission fueled my fire as I prepared to steer us into this next glorious phase. And so, armed with the smoldering ashes of Karen's ego and an unquenchable thirst for creativity, we moved toward our final act, a takeover that would unleash cataclysmic changes upon our quaint suburban existence. The glory was within our reach, and I felt an exhilarating rush as the curtains began to rise on our grand performance. It was time to not just reclaim our neighborhood, but to redefine it entirely, an audacious assertion that would forever change Maple Lane. The cheers had barely subsided when I saw it. A flicker of movement behind Karen where the infamous HOA bylaws were stacked precariously in glossy folders, like an avalanche waiting to happen. A shiver of inspiration zipped through my mind like an unexpected electrical surge. What if I could harness the absurdity of those rules, turning the very weapon they wielded against us into a tool for rebellion? I shot a glance at Mark. He raised an eyebrow, a knowing grin spreading across his face. Perhaps he was already privy to the faint sparks of madness dancing in my eyes. If Karen thought I was just here to stir the pot, she clearly hadn't seen me in full prosecutor mode, and I was about to show her a whole new world of chaos. Ladies and gentlemen, if we are to envision a vibrantly painted Maple Lane, we must first overturn the very laws that bind us, I exclaimed, voice booming with the kind of enthusiasm reserved for a motivational speaker on a caffeine high. Whispers cascaded around the room as I pointed at the meticulously printed bylaws, each one littered with the kind of nonsensical fines that only someone like Karen could possibly dream up. Fines for unconventional garden gnomes, I continued, my hands gesturing wildly. Unlicensed wind chimes. But most ridiculous of all, they even charge you for the audacity of not painting your fence the approved shade of beige. Beige. Let's explore how rebel-friendly we could be. The audience, now firmly on my side, erupted into laughter and incredulity at the absurdity of it all. Could we really weaponize the HOA's own ridiculousness against her? As laughter tempered into a spirited chatter of rebellion, various neighbors began sharing their own HOA horror stories. "I was fined for my flamingo yard ornaments," shouted Marge, an elderly woman whose pastel-toned sweater could truly rival even Karen's wardrobe. "They said they were tacky and didn't align with community aesthetics." The room erupted in supportive gasps and nods, and I leaned into the enthusiasm. This was it, the spark of a collective realization. We were not just hapless victims of Karen's reign. Inspired by the contagious spirit of defiance, I banged my palm on the table with enthusiasm. "My friends, we need to come together. Let's form a strategy. Imagine what we could achieve if we pooled our creativity and our grievances. Let's not just rebel. Let's do it with style. Let's throw a decorate your driveway contest. I'm thinking glitter, neon colors, and, oh, perhaps a mural celebrating everything Karen despises." I could hardly contain my glee as I expanded upon this vision, weaving vibrant images into the fabric of possibility. The momentum swelled in the room like a tidal wave, and soon enough we had enlisted a committee to challenge each fine, rally support against Karen's bylaws, and plan our creative uprising that would paint our once drab neighborhood in all the colors of the rainbow. Yet amid this burgeoning revolution, the sour presence of Karen loomed ominously, like an overcooked souffle that refused to collapse. "This is a serious breach of protocol," she bellowed, back on her feet and puffing with indignation, her face a canvas of rage. But her attempts to stifle our spirits only intensified the energy in the room. "I mean, really, this isn't a circus, Leah," she shot back. "Calling it a contest makes it sound like it's worth my time." My fellow neighbors tittered, and I couldn't help but throw in my witty 2 cents. "Oh, Karen, I assure you it'll be a show worth watching. Perhaps you could volunteer to be our judge? Think of it as an opportunity for rehabilitation." And with that, I could practically hear the table shaking from the waves of laughter crashing against Karen's flimsy authority. Just as I relished that moment of audacious disbelief from the woman in pastel, she pulled a move straight out of the HOA handbook, albeit one from a late-night melodrama. "If you persist in this ridiculousness, I will make you regret it. I will see you in court," she declared, her blue eyes sparkling with a hint of desperation. I blinked as the room fell silent, an almost palpable tension hanging in the air, and a mischievous grin tugged at my mouth. Little did she realize that courtrooms were my turf. "You could certainly try, Karen," I shot back, practically tasting victory. "But let's not forget, I'm in the business of prosecuting white-collar crime, and from where I'm standing, your reign could use a serious prosecution of its own. I'm more than ready for the challenge." With that empowering retort, the communal spirit felt electric, palpable in its defiance. I had not only stirred the pot but initiated a whole lively kitchen revolution. The audacity, the chaos, the hilarity. Our HOA meeting had morphed into a festival of freedom. Each laugh, each gasp, each wild idea, inching us closer to reclaiming our neighborhood and finally throwing Karen's reign of pastel oppression into the dumpster fire from whence it came. Our neighborly revolution would crescendo into a colorful storm, shaking the cobwebs of compliance from every lawn and driveway. And as the crowd became increasingly boisterous and resolute, I sensed that we were on the brink of something monumental. Little did Karen know, the real rodeo had just begun. The colors of change were about to be splashed liberally across Maple Lane. As the echoes of laughter reverberated off the walls of our makeshift battleground, my adrenaline surged like a double shot of espresso. I couldn't remember the last time I felt so alive, so utterly untethered. The room buzzed with possibility as I glanced around at my newfound comrades. Old faces turned fierce with determination, while hesitant never-sayers transformed into warriors ready to storm the pastel castle of Karen's delusions of grandeur. I would be the fearless leader wielding the sword of justice slathered in humor, and I relished every moment of it. What had once been a stifling HOA meeting had morphed into an impromptu town square rally for liberation. Now, I know I've been babbling about revolt, I declared, arms flailing as if I were a human wind turbine, but how about we add a tinge of strategy to our chaos? Let's not be a one-hit wonder. We need a battle plan! My eyes twinkled with mischief as I scanned the crowd. Imagine, task forces for yard gnomes, flamingos, and those poor defenseless wind chimes. We'll unite under the glorious banner of garden art and flaunt our diverse tastes like a badge of honor. Who's in? The wave of agreement rippled through the room, and Marge immediately raised her hand. I volunteer for flamingos, she exclaimed, her eyes gleaming with unfiltered zest. It was glorious. I could feel the gears turning. Our grassroots rebellion was actually taking shape, armed with pastel threats and subversive gardening decor. As the committee formed, every neighbor seemed to unveil a hidden brilliance. Sarah from 2 doors down, a quiet librarian during HOA meetings, offered to create a wall of shame featuring all Karen's absurd rules, plastered beside photos of our DIY rebellions. We'll turn her own rules into a spectacle, she said, winking theatrically. Laughter erupted, while others scribbled down suggestions for festive fence Fridays and subversive spiral society, where we could meet to plot rich tapestry of neighborhood subversion. Even Mark, always the cool, collected observer, couldn't hold back, launching into a witty pitch for a mock HOA awards night that would celebrate the best of our newfound creative liberties. My heart sang. Could we really paint our siblinghood with shades of mischief and empower our community against the concrete tyrant that was Karen? But like the pop quiz you never studied for, the reality hit. What would Karen retaliate with? Was Sunday morning even safe anymore? Why, oh why, did that woman own an unending supply of pastel blouses paired with an equally vexing level of control? It dawned on me that we needed a centralized action point. Hear me out, I called, gathering the energy back to me like a tornado. As much as I relish this creative rebellion, we must stay organized. We communally declare a day of reckoning, our neighborhood and our creativity unleashed. Suddenly, I imagined a date. A parade of artful chaos on Maple Lane, ruffling pastel feathers with everything Karen despised, slashing through our suburban zen. The crowd roared in delight, energy cascading around the room like a euphoric wave. Ideas flew faster than the neighborhood gossip, each one funnier and more absurd than the last. Oh, imagine the look on Karen's face when she stepped outside her perfectly manicured garden to behold a flamingo mob, complete with glow-in-the-dark accessories. Suddenly, I could visualize a neighborhood transformed, a rainbow explosion of rebellion that would leave her spinning in despair. Every glance exchanged felt electric, and the camaraderie fortified the walls of our temporary committee. The excitement crescendoed when I declared the day of reckoning as Liberate Maple Lane Day. It felt audacious enough to ruffle even Karen's pastel feathers. Meanwhile, the proverbial calm before the storm left my mind racing. I imagined it wouldn't be long until Karen's blossoming dread met our creativity in a ferocious clash. And honestly, all I could do was chuckle at the thought of her attempting to rein in our raucousness. Would she try to install a no-fun ordinance? I imagined her pastels fading to a dull gray amidst explosions of color flung raucously across our drives. Perhaps she truly envisioned herself as our neighborhood queen, ruling from atop a throne of beige. But little did she know this community, once shackled by her rules, had turned into a bouquet of bold anomalies, ready to thrill, ready to surprise, ready to paint Maple Lane anew. The meeting culminated with applause and raucous cheers, energy pulsating through the air like confetti. There it was, the sweet taste of rebellion, sugar-coated with neighborly camaraderie, and the whispers of triumph on the fringes of our newfound alliance. In that moment, I knew one thing. Karen might have sabotaged my car in petty retaliation, but she had unwittingly forged an unbreakable bond among us. And we weren't just ready to flip the script. We were poised to color outside every line she had ever drawn. I stepped outside the building, a newfound warrior of rebellion, ready to face whatever Karen devised next, armed with community, creativity, and an unshakable commitment to defy the very absurdity she embodied. It was on, and Maple Lane would never look the same again.